Talk with Lady O, where we talk about topics that are real, relevant, and relaxing. It's Tea Talk time.
Thank you, Tracy. And we're so excited that everybody has joined us today. I'm really excited because this is a very, very special month. This is Women's History Month. And so we have our own month, women. So let's just celebrate that we have our own month. And as you know, the history was written by men. So a lot of times women got kind of left out of history. And so we have our own month, and we're going to kick off this month by part two. Last week we had part one and talking about the impact of the black pastors, and how they have, been in politics, and everything has come through the black pastors and the black churches. And so today we want to talk about the women. Where were the women when all of this was going on? We were there. In the documentary, it said that 80% of the black churches were women, so we were there. So we want to talk a little bit more about that. So before we bring on our first guest, I just wanted to also say I'm happy because Tea Talk Club is 1 year old today. Last year when we got COVID and we were out of our churches, we didn't know what to do and what this was going to look like and how long we would be out. We had no idea it would be a whole year or more now. But the Lord told me to go live, get on Facebook Live and talk to the women, share about things, tell them what's going on, what thus said the Lord about this shutdown. And so that's exactly what I did. It happened one Sunday morning, and just as quick as the Lord told me to do it, I immediately, well, maybe not immediately, about an hour or so later, I said, okay, God, I'll do it. So I went immediately and I started Tea Talk Club, and we've been going ever since for a whole year. Every week, the Lord gives us something relevant to talk to you guys. You know, I keep it real with you. And so it's been very informative and relaxing. And we just had a great time. So I want to thank all of my viewers that have been here for the whole year. And if you are one of those that's been here from the very beginning, can you put that in the chat room so I can celebrate you and thank you for being a part of us for a whole year? And then if you have not been here the whole year, tell me how long you've been watching. Has it been 3 months, 4 months, 12 months, 2 months, or just is this your first day? Would you reach out to me and let me know? I want to hear from you. And why would you also invite somebody else to come? Tell them how great Tea Talk has been. And once they get started, they won't want to stop, because you don't know what you're going to miss when you miss Tea Talk. So we had a great time last week, and we have a great show planned for you today. I am extremely excited because I guess today is my sister. And some of you have met her before and some of you have not. But what happened was we were talking about the documentary on the history of the Black church. And I was asking her, what did you think about that? And so she was telling me how great it was. But she said, but you know, they missed a lot of stuff on women. And I said, well, what do you mean? So she was explaining that to me. And I said, how do you know all of that? She said, well, you know, I teach. She said, I'm an assistant professor and I teach the history of the Black church. And I said, okay. And I know you know about women, right? So we started talking and I said, I got to have you on. So I am so pleased to have her today. This is Dr. Kai Horn. I have to give her her props because she just got her doctoral degree. And I want her to come on and tell us about what she's doing, because she is amazing. She's smart, she's intelligent, and she has a lot to tell us. So without further ado, I want to bring her on. Pastor Kai Horn, Dr. Kai Horn, would you come on and say hello to us? Think you're muted.
Hello, Lady O. How are you? God bless you. Thank you for having me on today, and congratulations on your 1 year anniversary with Tea Talk.
Well, thank you. And congratulations is going to go to you, because I cannot not miss this opportunity to say again to you. I was looking on Facebook last week, and they had an award for you on there about pioneering. Tell me about the awards you have from your job and different. Everybody's just celebrating you this past month. So tell us about some of your accomplishments.
Oh, that's really amazing. That was really unexpected. The Black History Trailblazer, one of the positions that I own amongst many is the ICU surgery and PCU chaplain
Okay.
at Christa St. Michael Hospital. So I'm a board certified chaplain.
Mhm.
And I work with COVID patients. The majority of my patients were COVID patients.
Wow.
And so we were in and out of those rooms many of the times, much of the time. And I would have to be honest, I don't even really know how I got the award. It was a surprise. They called and asked me for a picture, and I sent them a picture, and then that ended up on the board. But here is what I think, listening to my VP and some of the things he shared, you know, in the process, and many don't know this, but you and I know this,
Mhm.
in the process, right after COVID hit really hard, and we were working really hard, you know, Abby was killed,
Mhm.
my only daughter. And, you know, I did sit out for a while, and, you know, I'm still in the grieving process, but just felt that not only God, but Abby would want me to just go back and to continue to work.
Right, right.
And ended up being helpful. I knew that God was speaking because shortly thereafter, probably 3 weeks after I was back, another mother came in whose daughter was in the same situation, but her daughter lived.
Wow. And that's hard. And I know last year we went through quite a
We
few
did. We did.
deaths. We lost our brother
That's right.
and then
11 days after Abby.
yeah, yeah, it was a really rough season. And then Uncle Roddy was in I think June
That's right.
summer.
A couple of months after them. Yeah.
So it's been a
It was
lot. I
hard.
know you have been through a lot of ministering to other people when you're going through your own grief of a daughter. I mean, Abby's, I mean, such a wonderful, wonderful young lady, and we miss her very
Mhm.
much. But you got Titan there too to kind of keep
I
you.
do. I do. I
Yeah.
do. And he's so much like her. It's funny.
Oh
He
my goodness.
really is.
Well, good.
But many of the comments that I kept hearing was, "You're resilient. I can't believe you're still here. You
Yeah.
should go home and grieve."
Yes.
And it wasn't that I wasn't grieving. And as I say at the hospital all the time, I still am. It's
Yeah.
not that I'm not grieving.
Right.
It's just that we don't grieve as those who have no hope.
That's it. That's the word. That's the word. Because you know where she is,
Mm-hmm.
and you do have hope that one day you're going to see her again, and so you know where she is. So it still hurts, if
That's right.
you still got to go through the human part of it. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I understand that your church is located because you are a senior pastor of a church.
Yes.
I wanted people to know that too. Where's your church? What's the name of your church?
Texarkana, Texas. It's Hopewell Temple CME Church in Texarkana, Texas.
Okay, very good. And notice that CME on there. And this is one of the things when I was talking to Pastor Kai, I was telling her, when I was growing up, it was AME, CME, and all these different names. I didn't know what it was as a child, but she's going to talk when she talks about some of the things in our uh, time together about how impactful those CMEs and AMEs were and what they really meant with some of the women that they produced and they celebrated.
That's right.
So anyway, now how many years have you been pastoring?
Total 23, June the 6th.
Oh my God. And as a senior pastor?
2005. How many years is that?
Wow, that's a lot. So, so we talk about women in the church, Black women in the church. One of the things that is not so prevalent in the denomination that we came through, which is Baptist, that you would not have women pastors. And so I know you have come through a lot, but as the historian, you have learned a lot about the women who paved the way. And we want to talk about that today, and you can interject pieces of other things that would be so helpful for people that are listening. We have women that are listening who are leaders in the church. We have women that are listening who are pastors, some senior pastors, and some of them are youth pastors and pastoral music and whatever. But the majority of the women are not senior pastors. So how does it feel with you being, do you feel like it's a little bit stressful or a little bit different now, being a female pastor, as you may think it was long ago?
Oh, very much so. It's very different in this season. With the majority of the seminaries, if you look at many years ago, not really so long ago, if you looked at the seminaries, it was majority men.
Mhm.
But if you go into the seminaries now, it's majority women. If you look at many of what we call in our CME church, our large houses, and I see that trend with the AME and the AME Zion churches as well, there are a lot of females who are leading, senior leading congregations. And if you think about the Susan Johnson Cook and
Right.
Millicent Hunter and Bishop Millicent.
Right.
And those women, you know, even in a time when the Baptist church traditionally did not embrace women, and now you have women that are pastoring mega churches
Yeah.
in those congregationalist denominations. So it's much different now
Right.
than it was back then. And I'm not saying that some of the misogynistic tendencies aren't still there.
Mhm.
Some of the challenges
Right.
aren't still there, but it is much different than before.
Well, let's go back a little history. You know, I love history and I want to kind of get that foundation. So let me ask you this question. So how did, you know, we know about slavery and we all came over as slaves and we're on the plantation and blah, blah, blah is kind of what we kind of think about. So how in the world did Black women start leading in the church, even to the point of being pastors or ministers? Um, I know you know back in the day. Can you kind of trace back a little bit to see when did it first happen? How did women get into a male-dominated position? It's hard now. So way back then, I just kind of would think it would be impossible. But when we read a history, it wasn't like that. That this was kind of common back in that days with Black women. So tell us a little bit about that history, about who were the first. You know, how did Black women get involved in being leadership and being in leadership?
That's a great question. Let me pay homage to a few women before them. You know, women have always had an innate sense of divine call,
Okay.
as well as an expressed call in the world, in the religious community.
Okay.
If we can start in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to, we can come up, but we can start in the Bible with
Right.
Huldah and Deborah and Anna and Miriam. And if we read those scriptures about them, these are women where even scripture says they were prophets.
Mm-hmm.
And we read it in the English translation, prophetess.
Mm-hmm.
But those words, prophet, the one who's called and the one who's called out.
Wow.
And so this is, while there are those that have an understanding that it is not biblical, this notion of being called and being called as some will call it a seer. It's one translation of it. Some others would call one who sees or foretells the future, or one who is sent out, the prophetess, the word in which it comes from, the one who is sent out to proclaim to others.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You know,
it's biblical. I mean, it goes back
biblical.
to the Bible. When you even talk about the women who went and spread the good news, they were spreading the good news about Jesus' resurrection.
It's biblical. And when we get to Jarena Lee, we're going to come to that very statement that you just made, because that's one of the statements that she made in defense of her call.
Okay.
But think about even in Africa, the nanas and the queen mothers and the priestess. I mean, this sense of divine call. And here's what is phenomenal. It's not the queens. Yes, there were queens, but it's also the kings.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Amina of Zaire, Nigeria, and Candace of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And Makeda, Queen of Sheba, and Nefertiti. They were kings.
Come on now. You see, look here, you see my
Wait a minute. That's what inspired me to go there. That's what I was like, she has the poster up in the back. I have to go there. She's the
I
pictures up in the
got
back. I have to go there.
These are look here, I'm following. Look here, I got a good legacy there. Look at all them queens and kings.
I see them. I see them.
And
I see them.
royalty. Right.
I
Call
see
that-
them.
Yeah.
They were called out. They were called out. And that becomes important as we lay the foundation of the female call.
Okay. Okay. Very
Because in the African culture, women were not subdued and regulated as we understand it.
Mhm.
These subordinate roles in society and religion, not as we understand it. As a matter of fact, some of the matrilineal systems that were used to trace ancestry came through the female.
Come on. Come on.
Some of the royal lineages was
Right.
traced through the female, through the woman. And there were situations where there were kings that were male.
Mm-hmm.
And if they didn't have the right wife, or if they didn't have the right mother, they couldn't even sit on the throne.
Wow. That's deep. That is deep.
It is because we don't hear that historically.
Well, because who wrote the history? And I told the ladies
That's right.
earlier, I said, a lot of stuff you don't hear doesn't mean it didn't exist. It just means whoever wrote the history book is what we're reading. And if you couldn't read and write and you're not writing history books and you don't have money to publish, then nobody hears your story. But
That's right. That's right.
it's still a part of the story, okay? It's
That
still a
is
story.
still a part. It's her story.
It's her story.
Yeah, we got his story, but we got her story.
And now we got her story. It needs to be
Yeah, her story.
No.
That's exactly right.
Well, okay,
Well,
so coming back from the Bible, now we're going through Africa and our African descent. So I'm talking about how women got to be in America, and I guess as leaders in the church. So they were in Africa, they were leading. And
They
it was
were leading.
Uh-huh.
And we come through the enslavement
Yes.
of a people. And now we have colonization.
Mm-hmm.
We have Africans who were trafficked
Yes.
into slavery. We've got this enslavement. Now we have enculturation
Yes.
and assimilation.
Mm-hmm.
And so whereas women had roles of leadership and they worked within their community, they didn't work under the men, they worked alongside of the men. Now enculturation and assimilation
Mm-hmm.
to a colonized society
Mm-hmm.
has brought about an understanding of sexism.
Come on. Come on.
So now we have assimilated into another society
Mm-hmm.
and adopted a culture that is not our own. And I want to start here because it's systemic. I want to show you how systemic it is.
Mhm.
You have babies here.
Mm-hmm.
You all said relevant. You said we could tell the truth. So let me tell the truth.
Okay.
You're having the babies.
Uh-huh.
You're gonna ship the men off somewhere else
Mm.
to another plantation.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna leave Mrs. in the house and sneak over
Yeah. Right.
to the slave quarters at night,
Right.
right? And so now we've changed the understanding of who we are
Right.
and what we do and how we live.
Right.
And we have divided in our order to conquer.
Mm. Hmm.
I say that because as we begin to talk about women, it will not take me that much more, but I want to get this foundation. We begin to divide and conquer. So we're no longer working together as we once did in the yam fields in Africa, where everyone had to get into the field and everyone had to help with the house and everyone had to help with the babies. It's no longer that. Now the men are shipped up off of here and the women stay here. And so now we divide you so that we can conquer you. We've already taken your language, already tried to take your religion and subjugate you that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we divide and conquer the family and the family structure. And so now you have no choice but to assimilate into a culture that you do not know.
Right. And you know, when you were sitting there saying that, I was thinking to myself, if you are a leader, even though people enslave you, you're still a leader.
That's
so
right.
if you take my man and put him to another plantation, somebody's got to lead. And I can just imagine a lot of strong Black women had to lead. They were already leaders, but somebody's going to lead. So let me go back also one thing you said that that we were raised up to work side by side. That's biblical. I take people to Genesis all the time and said, the Lord told them to what? To be fruitful, multiply, and subdue, to rule. them to do
Mhm.
that. So go back and check your Bible. We're not supposed to be that the man is just lording over the woman and having her do whatever he wants her to do at his pleasure. That came, like you said, we divided and conquered and had to subjugate the woman to do some things that she didn't want to do. But
Lady O, even if you go over to where the passage begins to talk about the marriage, husbands love your wives, wives obey your husbands. We always go to that, but we forget that first line says submit to one another.
to one another, that's what it says. Yeah.
It is the same thing, but we miss that
We pick
because
and choose. We like,
we
I
miss
like
that.
that one. I picked that one, but I'm not gonna pick the other one. I didn't see the other one, right?
Right, we miss that. The Christianity that developed from oppression.
I lost your picture.
Yes, I sorry about that.
Yeah.
The Christianity that developed as a result of the oppressive was not for healing. It was not for self-improvement. It's not for social awareness. It was not for the community coming together. It was for domination.
Yeah.
And so as Protestantism made its way into America, and the Methodist churches will start there because we can't go everywhere with all of the churches.
Yeah.
As they began to develop, and John Wesley, the Methodist societies were created in the Americas, and Francis Asbury then began to further develop evangelism within the societies, even to the point, because there were, like, the Anglican Church in which it comes out of, they really believed those pastors had slaves.
Okay.
And so Francis Asbury says that one of the beautiful pieces about Methodism is that the evangelism that comes forth should work towards the eradication of slavery.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So
yeah. So go back to just for a minute, that transitioning from Africa to the Americas. So when we got here in America, everybody, number one, everybody didn't come over as slaves. There were some people who were educated that were Black. There were some people who were Black who had money, who could read. And so talk to me about those very first women that came over. Do you, how, as far back as you can go, who were the first African-American preachers and pastors and leaders?
Well, though they came later, those would not have been the first women that came over with your question. Those came later on, after the development of Methodism, after Protestantism developed. That piece came later. Those would not have necessarily been the first women. I think what you said earlier, you hit the nail on the head. The first women that came over were those women that came during the slave trade.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that were part of those communities. And ultimately what happened, when we came from Africa, we had our own religion, our own understanding of God. It's like you were saying, there were some people that came with money, but those weren't the ones that came through the trade.
Right.
But there were some that were better off than others, if I can use that language, in Africa. Right. That were tricked into coming. Not everybody was stolen. Some was told that there was going to be a better way, and it was not until they got into the ship that they understood that they were being trafficked to a place where they did not know. And when they got here, then they started. After a while, they began to develop Christianity. Some believed, for example, the Puritans who were here. Yeah. They wanted to evangelize the Africans because they believed that would work, slaves obey your masters. Mm-hmm. This would work towards increased subjugation. It would teach them how to be humble and how to be obedient. And they wanted to do that for the purpose of maintaining slavery. Whereas the Quakers and William Penn and them coming over for religious freedom, being dissenters, right, they wanted to evangelize the Africans as well, but they wanted to do it for the purpose of abolishing slavery, which is through that process of the Holy Spirit and the willingness of the Spirit within, the development of the Spirit within, the inner light, right, of everyone, their beliefs. That's where they became abolitionists and started working towards the abolition of slavery. Right. As a result, the evangelism continued even on the plantation. Here's here's the hypocritical piece that goes into this development. They're evangelizing Africans. Once they begin to teach them to read, to give them some sort of improvement, not necessarily self-improvement, it was for the purpose of the continued oppression of the people.
To use them.
And that's right. And so even to the point that there was a law that if you were a heathen, you could be enslaved. But once you became a Christian, then you were no longer a heathen and you could not be enslaved.
Exactly.
And so after they were baptized, they changed the law.
Yeah. And I found that really, and the documentary did speak to that a little bit about if you had been baptized or if you were a Christian, which means you could read the Bible, you could, quote some verses or whatever, then you were not a heathen. So they had people in classes. And so a lot of people were taught to read by the Quakers. They were teaching them to read the Bible to save them. But in the meantime, they were teaching to read the Bible. Now I can read whatever I want to read. And then I read about Moses. And I think that's what Harriet Tubman said. She said,
yes,
if I was able to read the Bible, I read about Moses and how his God freed them, so she said, now I got that from my people. If he could free the Egyptians out of slavery of Pharaoh, surely he could get us off the slave plantation. So I think it's a lot in there, and I know you can't go into all of it, but just putting that picture together to figuring out how we got over here. And I know there were the Quakers and the Protestants. The Quakers were more trying to teach us, how to read and how to free us. But the ultimate goal was still to make us better slaves, to make us fit to serve in the house, to make us fit to do things or whatever. But the Underground Railroad, I think too, that they helped with that. So there were some good people, but
that's right. The Quakers did assist with the Underground Railroad and helped to make that go. And we're talking about women in leadership. Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth.
Right.
Were ministers.
Right.
I'm going to use a language that I got from one of the books by a womanist theologian, Rosetta Ross. And she talks about the ritualistic mundane.
Okay.
I use that language because as we begin to experience this call of God, it was out of those things that we do every day.
Right.
And the rituals that we come to know. Jarena Lee is in this process, and Richard Allen is preaching and is now free and has been ordained, and they now have a church. And she says, I feel this call to preach. And he says, it's not in the discipline. And here's what's interesting. It's not in the same discipline of the Methodist Episcopal Church that after you and your organization helped to build a new church for St. George's Church, then you could no longer come to the altar. You had to stay in the balcony.
Now, you went a little fast. Now, some people don't know this.
Okay.
Okay, I get you. Okay, let's go back and talk about Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. So they were kind of like preachers. They had been called. They had this call, and the call was to free their people. Those were pastors. Those were leaders. They weren't called pastors, but they were bold enough, and they were led by God, and they were protected by God, even by the North Star and all of that kind of stuff. You have to look at what they did, not so much as what they were called. They were called out to lead, and they led men and women to freedom, and even had, churches and things like that. But so after we leave that phase, then we're going to come to the phase of where we have the first woman who was to preach. And so that's coming through the Methodists. When you're talking about the Quakers, and now we're into the Methodist denomination, did they come through the Quakers or the Puritans? Or that might be a little bit.
Yeah, that's a lot. No, they were Methodists.
Okay.
So you have the Africans that are on the plantations.
Right. Okay.
And you have the various people who are evangelizing during that time.
Right. And there were a lot of women. Okay, go ahead.
And well, at this time, these were actually the men who were going to evangelize.
So
Those
what
who were
century are
the
we talking about? Now, first we were talking about was this around the 1400s or the 1600s?
we're kind of past the 1600s,
Okay.
moving into the 17 and 1800s.
17 and 18.
That's the direction in which we're moving.
Gotcha.
Okay, so now men, I talked about Francis Asbury evangelizing. Now men are going in and they are preaching for the purpose of converting the slaves. They want to convert them to Christianity.
And these are white people who are Quakers or missionaries, or who are these? Who's converting them?
These are white. The
Methodist.
ones that I'm talking about at this point are white Methodist ministers. You had Methodists evangelizing, you had Baptists evangelizing, but these are the ones that the names I'm calling are white Methodist ministers.
Okay, I got it. Mm-hmm.
And they are evangelizing
Mm-hmm.
because they believed in the abolition of slavery. They were working to abolish slavery.
Right.
And I'm not saying that none of them had slaves. I'm just saying overall, the Methodist societies were anti-slavery.
A missionary kind of thing of saving, okay, and helping to teach them and train them. Okay, go ahead. And they
yes,
were church together. So
they saw the go ye therefore. The go ye therefore and teach all nations. Baptist,
right.
That's what they believed.
Okay.
That was part of the base belief. And they were talking about very basic beliefs. So it was part of the base belief. So they were going in and they were evangelizing, but also recognizing those persons who were gifted. They were recognized. That's how Richard Allen. And they started letting him preach at St. George's Church. They were recognizing the gifting of those men who were preaching, which leads to my thought about authority later on, but that's something different. They were recognizing those who had gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process, as the churches then began to develop,
mm-hmm.
As the various, if you would call churches, the various societies began to develop, then women began to feel that sense of call as well.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so we talk about the first female that we have documentation of, Jarena Lee. Okay. And she goes to Richard Allen and she says, I feel the call to preach. Mm-hmm. And again, the statement I made earlier, the same book of discipline that they're using that's adopted from the Methodist Episcopal Church, mm-hmm. The same discipline that they were governed by when they decided to separate from the Methodist Episcopal Church. Mm-hmm. That same discipline, he says, in this discipline, there's no precedent for women preaching.
Right.
Women being ordained to preach.
Right. Now, these women had built this church, helped to pay for the church as well, as if I'm remembering right. Did they contribute financially to building that church as well?
Well, the Free African Society, everyone did.
Yeah.
The Free African Society had been developed for the self-improvement of those Africans mm-hmm. who were now in the church, those Africans who were now free. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, they help with labor and they help with finances.
With finances, that's what I thought. Mm-hmm. With the understanding that they could go to church with them and be a part of it, but it didn't turn out that way. It did not.
And in the Methodist churches, that was very common for those who were of African descent and those who were either slaveholders or formerly slaveholders to go to church together, or the European sector to go to church together. It was very common for them to go to church together.
And this was then 1700s?
We are at the 1700s and now moving. Okay. Moving towards the 1700s into the 1800s.
Okay. And so at that time, my point is way back then, they were going to church together, 17 and 1800s, and then something happened. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So they decided to separate, of course. We talked about that. The churches separated. The African American, the AME Church, or African Methodist Episcopal Church, then separated and formed their own denomination from the MEC, from the Methodist Episcopal Church. And once the denomination was formed, again, you have the men, and they are preaching, and they are teaching and functioning as evangelists and leaders in the church. And again, women began to feel this call. Women began to experience this call. It's not a new call, because we've already been working in leadership.
Right.
It was biblical.
Right.
It's Africa. It is the woman that continues to run the household when the man is separated from her during enslavement.
She's always leading.
She's always out there, always leading, always holding the fort, always holding the family together in the midst of the struggles of what's going on, whether it's plantation or what have you. She's always there leading. And so now she's feeling the call to lead in another way.
Okay.
And so as she feels this call to lead in another way, she's then told that she cannot lead because it is not in the discipline. There's no precedence for it.
In the doctrine, the Methodist doctrine, in their beliefs, they had not seen that a woman would be able to hold this position or to be a preacher, like to get this ordination or like a man. Is that what you're saying?
The Book of Discipline does hold our doctrines, rules, and regulations for the church, our articles of religion, our general rules of the Methodist societies is what it's called. Right. And so Richard Allen says, I don't see a precedence for it.
Okay. Okay. And see, that's what I get to, because I think a lot of people did not come through the Methodist. So when you say that word about the book for your doctrines and the precedent for it, that means that they don't see any law or that
there's nothing in there that says women should be ordained. This is what he's saying.
Exactly.
We don't have anything in there that says women should be ordained. Okay. So I don't believe that women should be ordained.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. Okay.
So she makes the same argument that you made earlier. She was like, well, who were these women who were at the cross? Who were the first ones to go tell the gospel message? Who were the first ones to go tell the message of the resurrection? That was her argument. Right. And she went on to preach. And while she was not ordained, she was very, very successful. And there were people who would come to hear her. She went on to continue to preach, to continue to function in that call.
Right. So she was a trailblazer. She was one of the trailblazers that
exactly
said, I'm going to do it anyway. And it was not leading them on the Underground Railroad. It was leading them now in the church. And
that's right.
That transition made it. Okay. So then you said something too. I just wanted to kind of bring this out, which makes sense now. What is the AME? You know, and then you got the MEC. So the MEC was the original, and it separated and became the AME because A means African Methodist Episcopal. I don't know if we had C, but I know it was AME when I was coming up. So I didn't know where that came from.
Okay. So the Methodist Episcopal Church South, eventually the Methodist Episcopal Church North and South, with the northern sector and the southern sector. Right. And the AME Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and the African Methodist Episcopal Church Zion,
AMEZ,
come out of the Methodist Episcopal Church North. The CME Church comes out of the Methodist Episcopal Church South.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot to take in, but I got it. It makes sense.
It is. Well,
but the point is that they were divided because of this issue of African Americans being able to worship together wherever they wanted to, and because the women were not allowed to preach. Is that right?
I don't know if the second one was actually a reason that the church was divided.
Okay.
because the church was never divided on that principle. Yes, the AME church started with them not being able to worship together. And really, we paid for a church and we helped you to build a church. And now we're going backwards. We were working together and now we're going backwards. So we may as well separate and have our own denomination over issues of racism like
Right.
today.
Exactly.
So so the women issue was not necessarily why they separated, but that was not the only woman issue. In 1888, Henry McNeil Turner, who became one of the bishops in the church, ordained a woman, and the conference rejected it.
And wow.
They got to the conference and they rescinded that ordination. It wasn't until 1948 that Rebecca Glover was the first woman actually ordained in that church. And then there was also Mary G. Evans, who attended Wilberforce University. She was received a doctorate of divinity in 1924. She was called at an early age and ordained as a teenager.
In the early 1900s?
That's just the AME church. Now the first female to actually be ordained was Julia Foote. Mm-hmm. She was in the AME-Z church. Now listen, this is 1894.
Wow, AME-Z.
She was converted as a 15-year-old. She believes that she was full of the process of sanctification, filled with the Holy Spirit. She said she saw an angel. And God told her that she, when she saw that angel, she told God she would do anything.
Wow.
She would do anything.
Lord.
And they ordained her. And there were many other women during that time that became ordained. There were other women. They created the Female Benevolent Society. And this church, the AMEs and the AMEZs and the CMEs now have women in high levels of authority. There was Florence Spearing Randolph. And she pastored several churches. This is AMEZ again. She pastored several churches. Now, here's what I thought interesting about her, which I thought I had some kind of connection for the CMEs that are listening. That she would go into a church. She had a history of making a church viable. And once the church became viable, they would remove her and place a man there.
Wow. Okay.
This is... Yeah,
that's what I was about to ask you. What are some of the challenges with the equity? Because I know it's not been like that in the 60s when I was, kind of seeing what was going on in the church. There was not this kind of gender equity or the acceptance of women as pastors. So I'm trying to figure out, would you say that it was more prevalent in the Methodist church to accept, or more that you all did it first, or more readily in the Methodist church? Because it was not like that in the Baptist church.
I think that our history tells the story that it was more prevalent to begin to accept women, even though some women came late. But now, let me tell you about a couple of other women. Then I want to get to the woman that I really want to talk about.
Okay, go ahead.
And I have to be honest, if I'm transparent, I don't know a lot about her, but I do know this about her.
Right.
Julia Foote, that was Mary Small, who was the first ordained elder.
Okay.
That was 1898.
1898. And ordination papers really say something, because you couldn't get a position, even today, you can't get certain positions. You certainly can't be a pastor unless you're ordained, and you have to have somebody who is a pastor and who has credentials to ordain you, and usually they're males. So, okay, go ahead.
1954, F.E. Redwine and Quinchella Whitlow, they are CME. Okay. And so those were ordained ministers, ordained pastors in the CME church.
Right.
But I want to talk about this lady just a moment. And like I said, I need to be honest, I don't know much about her. I was talking to, he says I'm a colleague, but I still say he's my professor. And he was sharing with me a book that has some information in there about her. I didn't have time to read before this, but her name is Trudy Trim.
Okay.
And in 1965, she was the first female pastor accepted to the National Baptist Convention.
Wow. Wow. That's deep. We have to study her, because I haven't heard a lot about her either myself. But I
have to be honest, I didn't know her until I started teaching this class.
Mhm.
and reading the book and learning about more of the women who early on were ordained. I did not know originally that there was a female who had been accepted, a female pastor
Right.
who had been
Well, let me
accepted.
ask you this, and coming on up quickly because our time is kind of running out. Who were some of the trailblazers that you know that are had great impact on where we are today? You know of any trailblazers that just kind of who were your
Everyone I've just named,
yeah
everyone I've just named,
yeah they were
because they that we would
yeah
not be here today.
hmm
We would not even have talk about setting a precedence.
uh-huh
You know, they not only set a precedence for preaching, but they also set a precedence for perseverance,
okay
because there are challenges,
right.
and there's still challenges.
What would you say would be the challenges that women, because you're a female pastor, what would you say would be challenges today that female pastors are faced with? Because I know long ago it was number one, you couldn't be a pastor, and you had a lot of problems in the church and people not supporting. So today, what would you say would be the challenges that you see? Because I know you have other female pastor friends.
Mhm. Sexism is still one of the greatest challenge.
Okay.
Um, although we have made great strides in ministry, there's still just as many people who still don't believe. And let me say that I'm gonna stick this in here, but we don't have time to talk about it. Even more so in today's society,
Women.
the challenges of women who devalue the role of a female pastor.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You're right about that. You know, women hate on other women. And somebody asked me the other day, do you think a woman could really do the role of a pastor? I said, yeah, they could. I said, but the biggest challenge would be other women because the women in the church would not respond like would do a man. You know, they wouldn't support as well. And so would you say that is you've seen that, or is that just my own thinking that
No, 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 no. I not only have I seen it and experienced it, I've heard many women talk about it.
wow. And that's sad when we can't support our own selves because if you're bringing the word of God and you got the program, you're doing the same thing that the man is doing. What is it, women, about us that we cannot support a woman who has been gifted and called to lead a church? I think a lot of times I see women will sit up on a church that's not going anywhere if it's a man, and in a church that's progressive, they're not going because it's a woman and they are confused. And I'm glad we talked about this at the very beginning about the women leaders in the Bible and what God originally intended for us to be. And then you bring it on over into Africa, and on into where we've come up through the years leading and being very impactful to the African American church and the African American family and community. So talk about that real quick, because I've heard it said that there's 80% of the congregations are made of Black women. And if they left, then we'd have a big problem because 20% would be left. And that the church, the female has been the backbone of the Black family and the backbone of the church, and not to demean any man, but because of our history, it has had to be that way because, they took the men and put them on other plantations and kind of left the woman there. And so we had to do what we had to do. And in the churches, I know women work a lot. We're leaders, we're givers, and those kind of things. So, what would you say to that about women in the church as far as leaders? Would you agree that women have really done a lot to sustain and propel the Black church?
I would say women have sustained, not just done a lot, not just have done a lot. Women have sustained the Black church. But I think what's important here also is when I talked about the language of a ritual mundane, we are, even as leaders, nurturers of faith, nurturers of home,
Nurture
nurturers of community.
everyone.
So that's why it becomes ritual mundane. It's the everydayness of life
Right.
that calls us. Black Lives Matters.
Mm-hmm.
That's everydayness of life. And those are the things that call us. And so often when a person that does not have that understanding, oh, they just want to be up front. They just want to lead. They just want to be seen. That's what they suggest the call is, not understanding that it is out of a place and time for a divine purpose. And because who God called us to be, that divine purpose is for the entire community. So people don't understand that if they let us walk in the call and the vocation, because the challenge is not as much the call as it is the vocation. You can be called, go work with the missionaries, or in the kitchen,
or with the children,
or the children, you know, or something outside of the church where we don't necessarily have to call you a leader in the church.
Wow.
It's the vocation of it.
Yeah.
Now there are some people have the theological issues with the call, but it's the are you going to come in here and do a work and do a busy, expect pay, expect the same compensation as a man, expect for someone to honor you because of it, and the same respect, and not understanding that it's a deeper issue than that. Because when I stand and proclaim, I'm proclaiming for the family. I'm proclaiming for the community. I'm proclaiming for the life. I'm in the salvation process.
Yeah.
You know, I'm working in the salvation. It's holistic.
Yeah.
It's everyone. And often because we are women, it's not about us.
Mm-hmm. It never usually is. We're nurturers. We're givers.
That's what we do. That's what we do.
Push somebody else up. You know, support.
That's what we do.
And I do say that there are some women, just like in everything else, that may be their calling, that what they really want. But for the most part, women are nurturers, but you can still nurture and be a leader. You can nurture and be a pastor. So it doesn't mean just because you nurture, it means that you just take care of the children and the women. And I just say whatever God has called you to do, that nobody should be questioning that or wanting you to work with the children. If that's not your calling, to work with the children, if God has called you to be able, like Deborah, to lead an army, you know, to be the judge, then why would you want to subjugate yourself or somebody else to do something that God didn't call them to do?
Or Huldah, where the men wouldn't even go to war without her. They wouldn't even go to war without her advice.
Right.
Or Anna, who stayed in the temple, and the moment that she saw Jesus, she goes out to proclaim the world. Yeah. And that scripture calls her prophet.
Right.
A prophet.
I know. It's all in the Bible. So listen, let me ask you this as we get ready to close. So we got a good history, and you're going to have to go and read and Google and get the full thing, but you can see we didn't even get a chance to talk about denomination, but you're from the AME, so you can tell a whole bunch, but you were born, I think, Baptist.
I'm CME.
I mean, CME.
I'm CME. And you know what? I'm gonna say something. I was born, you know, our father is a Baptist pastor, but we are third or fourth generation CMEs.
Wow. Well, I know that it's in the bloodline, and here's the thing. You know, when I look at blood, okay, our daddy is a pastor. So his blood, he bleeds and he births pastors. Right. And so, you know, if it's a man, they say, oh yeah, he's gonna be a pastor just like his dad. The blood does not see gender. It's blood, okay? It's genes, it's hormones, it's all of the things that make me who I am based upon who my father is. Don't let me start. Okay, let me close this because I'll start preaching here about who my father is, okay? So what would you say, where are we going with women in leadership? What do you see the future for women? Or would you have any advice for them?
Oh, wow.
Want to preach, want to pastor?
Well, I do think that we are going to continue to forge forward. I was saying that we already have in those three Methodist denominations women at the highest offices, Bishop.
Mhm.
So we're going to continue to move forward. There are going to be more women. Again, there are more women in seminary now than ever. And one of the pieces that's going to make us kind of saturate the ministry area is because we're now seeing that there are other ministries besides pastoring.
Mhm.
There are other called ministries besides pastoring, and even besides children. We have we had a new resolution passed at our last general conference about specialized ministries where people are doing religion and the arts,
Right.
you know. And so people are starting to see all these other areas in which God can use them in the church. So we're going to move forward. We're going to begin to saturate ministry.
Right.
If I had some advice,
Mhm.
my advice would be pray.
Yes.
I was speaking with someone last night, and I was telling them I strive for a life that is centered around prayer
Mhm.
and not prayer centered around my life.
Wow.
I don't want a life where life is first
Okay.
and prayer is secondary.
Wow. That's
I
good.
want a life where at that appointed time,
Mm-hmm.
I bow my head
Mm.
before my creator. And I've never missed that opportunity
Right.
because it is that enables me to do all that God has called me to do.
Wow.
And not only strive for that to be your life,
Mm-hmm.
but of course I'm at present not married. I'm hoping to be there one day, but I'm not now.
Yes.
But I still want that life for Titan because they still support.
Yeah.
They go through
Mm.
with you. Whatever you're going through, they go through with you, your spouse, even Pastor O. Even if your spouse is a senior pastor,
Right.
they're still going through with you with the joys of ministry and the sorrows
Right. Right.
of ministry.
Right.
And so for our family life, our life and our family life,
Yeah.
that and I know you and I talk about this a lot in private, that cannot be neglected. It's prayer.
Yeah.
It's prayer.
Oh my God.
It's prayer, and prayer must govern the life. Don't let your life govern the prayer. Let prayer govern the life. And if prayer governs the life,
yes,
then all that God has you go through, and all that God desires for you to do, and all that God desires for you to be with your family, your children, within your family, your immediate family, sister, brother, everything else, it will be blessed, anointed, favored, will manifest the goodness of God in the land of the living.
In the land of the living.
In the land of the living. And while other finances are dying over here and families dying over here, you can decree and declare not just about your physical health, but I shall not die but live and see the salvation of the Lord in the land of the living, because prayer is governing it all. We can't do it. Even with what went on in history, even in Africa, prayer governed the life.
Yeah. You know,
life didn't govern the prayer.
That's how we made it. That's how we made it. We could not have made it but by prayer and trusting the Lord. But, you know, you said something a minute ago, and it just resonated with me when you were talking about prayer. But you also were talking about, well, what I wrote down in my brain was scripture that I remember is that your gifts will make room for you.
Every time.
Where we're going, I think one of the things that I saw that I really thought was really difficult for women, maybe not now so much as maybe 10, 15 years ago, that women were struggling. They were angry because they were not being let to sit at the table, to, you know, you got to stand down. You can't be behind the pulpit, but you have to just be who God called you to be. Even if you don't have the title, even if you don't have the pulpit or the platform, you're gonna have to find out, and what you just said a minute ago is so profound, that you're finding ways to pastor in other capacities. You
That's
may
right.
be a pastor who specializes in art, in music, or whatever, and be content with that if that's the gifts that God has given you. So I think we gotta not be so consumed with what we are being held back from or what we can't have, like the senior pastor position, and look at it and ask God, pray, and ask God, what is it that you want me to do? What gifts have you given me, and how can I use them to honor you? How can I use them to serve people? And that's what Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, that's what they did back then. I just want to serve, Lord. You called me out and you've given me all these revelations. I can lead people out. I might not be able to have this big church, but I can do that. So I think we're going to have to look, that's what I'm hearing you say. We have to look beyond what it is society is saying we need to have, or even what we feel like we want.
That's right.
Not be what God wants you to have. But you got to
That's
look
right.
at that, and your gifts are going to make room for you. And if you pray and listen to God, he's going to show you the right way to go.
That's right.
But you got to pray.
Must pray. God called us decisively as women.
As women. Yes. The wailing, remember the wailing women, the women that go before the war, they go out praying and crying and praising and whatever, and it broke down a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Prayer will break through where you can't break through. And a lot of times men start to fight women because we're trying to fight them. You don't fight that way. You fight on your knees. You
That's
fight
right.
by using your gifts, whatever God has given you, not trying to put somebody else down. And that's in everything, but I don't want to get into that. But it's time for us to go. But I've had a good time talking to you about women, because month is the month we celebrate each other. And I want to just say to you, women that are watching, can you celebrate a couple of women? Can you call them up and tell them, look, this is Women's History Month, and I honor you. You taught me how to be a lady. You taught me how to save my money. You taught me how to interview. Can you celebrate some other women? Because we don't celebrate each other. So why would anybody else want to? Respect yourself, celebrate each other. So today, I celebrate you, my sister, Pastor Kai Horn. I honor you as a woman who's a trailblazer, who is making a difference in the lives of your family and your community, how you're over there. The Lord is leading you to raise up your daughter's son, and how you're leading the congregation and being all those things. You are a trailblazer. You are a pastor. You are the backbone of the church and the family. So I celebrate you today and say thank you for everything that you do. And I pray for you, as I know that one of my favorite sermons that a pastor preached one time, he said, we as leaders, we have things we go through. We are bleeding while leading. So,
Right.
Yeah. So even though you may be bleeding, you may be, having your own issues, you still what? Lead, because you are a strong Black woman. And I celebrate you today for the impact that you've made on the Black church and churches all over this world. So without further ado, go celebrate a woman. Thank you, Pastor Kai Horn, and bless you and all the other ladies that are in my voice. Make sure you put in the chat room some women that you honor, celebrate someone, don't hate, celebrate, right? And lift up and push somebody forward, because when you push them forward, guess what? You're going forward too. Well, listen, my time is up. Thank you for joining me at Tea Talk as we celebrate Black History Month. This month is Women's History. So next week we'll be joined with another wonderful trailblazer woman. And so you'll hear more about that. So we will see you next Sunday at 3 for Tea with Lady O.
Thank you, Lady O.